trouble in Iraq.
We believe that the situation in Iraq today is very, very serious.
The U.S. president takes the blame and takes a new approach.
Our troops in Iraq have fought bravely. They have done everything we have asked them to do. Where mistakes have been made, the responsibility rests with me.
Today on News and Review, a new plan in Iraq. Hello, I'm Carla Robinson. The campaign in Iraq hasn't gone according to U.S. President George Bush's battle plan. So, 4 years after it all began, he's making changes. They come in the face of an increasing death toll and mounting questions about whether the U.S. can, in fact, ever win. One thing this isn't about anymore is former Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein. He was once one of the most feared men in the world, capable of using murder, torture, and brutality against his own people. That was before the United States-led invasion, before he was found hiding in a hole in the ground. Saddam Hussein was put on trial for crimes against humanity.
استمع إلى قرار المحكمة واقفا.
اسمع القرارات.
إيه واقفا، كن واقفا.
لا قاعد.
أوقف. وقفوا.
جالس. يلا لا تطويل.
يلا جوزوا منا. جوزوا منا.
لا تطويل. حكي وياك.
قررت المحكمة الحكم على المدان صدام حسين المجيد بالإعدام شنقا حتى الموت لارتكاب قتل العمد كجريمة ضد الإنسانية وفق المادة 12 أولاً أليف بدلالة المادة 12 أولاً ثانياً ثالثاً.
Last fall, he was convicted on charges related to mass killings and the torture of women and children. He was sentenced to death, but like many things in the new Iraq, that didn't go according to plan either. Legal observers had already expressed concern about his trial. His execution was even more controversial. We aren't going to show it, but one of the guards used his cell phone to make a video of the hanging. In it, people can be heard taunting Saddam Hussein and cheering his death. For some, it was an ugly display, and the whole thing came across more like a mob lynching than justice. Soon it was being watched around the world on the internet. There have been fears the video would inflame the situation in Iraq. The fighting there is no longer just between the U.S.-led forces and insurgents. Now the worst violence is between Iraqis, between Sunni Muslim and Shia Muslim militias. Many are calling it a civil war. The United Nations says more than 34,400 Iraqi civilians were killed in 2006. More than 36,000 were injured. The cost has been heavy for the U.S. as well. More than 3,000 Americans have been killed. To try to turn things around, George Bush appointed a new Secretary of Defense and said he would pay attention to the findings of a special panel that had examined the situation. Here's Allison Smith on what the special panel reported on.
President Bush didn't ask for their advice, but this distinguished group of former politicians, presidential advisors, and a former Supreme Court justice may have built a bridge across a bitter political divide in the U.S. over the war in Iraq.
We do not recommend a stay-the-course solution. In our opinion, that approach is no longer viable.
The group offered 79 recommendations, a way forward in Iraq. Key components: changing the mission, moving soldiers out of major combat into training and supporting Iraqi forces. That could mean almost all U.S. combat brigades will be out of Iraq by early 2008. A broad new diplomatic offensive that includes direct talks with Syria and Iran, a country the Bush administration coldly refuses to talk to.
We believe that the situation in Iraq today is very, very serious. We do not know if it can be turned around, but we think we have an obligation to try.
Politicians on all sides seized on the report as not just a way forward, but perhaps a way out.
This report is such an opportunity. It is no guarantee, but there's an obligation, I think, to try to find a new way forward.
And let's speak with one voice as we move forward on Iraqi policy. I think that's the most important lesson and the most important track that the country could take right now. Let's get behind this president.
The report is by no means a prescription for victory. That word is effectively gone from the political vocabulary here now. In fact, the report points to the diminishing influence of the United States in Iraq and leaves President Bush to consider measures that may only improve the odds for what is cautiously called success. Allison Smith, CBC News, Washington.
After the report's release, the question was, what would George Bush do? He was under tremendous pressure to start pulling out. His Republican Party was losing support because of it. The rival Democrats had even gained control of the U.S. Congress. But in a speech to his nation, Bush went the opposite way. CBC reporter Neil McDonald has that story.
George W. Bush's officials emphasize that he gets it, that he understands the public's deep unhappiness.
Our troops in Iraq have fought bravely. They have done everything we have asked them to do. Where mistakes have been made, the responsibility rests with me.
Bush's new plan, a buildup of troops starting almost immediately. By early summer, the American force in Iraq will swell by more than 20,000 soldiers. Democrats oppose the plan and said so today after meeting Bush.
This is the third time we are going down this path. 2 times it has not worked. And we wanted to know why there was any prospect that it would be successful now. Why are they doing this now? That question remains.
The answer, says the White House, is that the Iraqi government has found some steel. Bush assured Americans tonight that Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki is now prepared to subdue the notorious militia operated by his chief supporter, the cleric Muqtada al-Sadr, and that furthermore, Iraqi soldiers are finally ready to stand up and fight.
We can expect to see Iraqi troops chasing down murderers, fewer brazen acts of terror, and growing trust and cooperation from Baghdad's residents.
George Bush's plan is controversial. Many Americans are very wary about any escalation in Iraq. Can it succeed? As the CBC's Brian Stewart found out, there are serious risks.
It has a desperate all-or-nothing air to it. This planned U.S. surge into Baghdad.
I will want to make sure that the mission is clear and specific.
Perhaps the last roll of the dice by an American president whose previous Iraq gambles have brought him to the edge of political bankruptcy at home and abroad. It is extraordinarily high risk. The plan will call for at least 20,000 U.S. troops to move aggressively into the most violent areas of sprawling Baghdad, a city of 7.5 million in civil war. It further calls on troops to take on the large militia armies of both Shia and Sunni Muslims. As even 20,000 troops is not enough by itself, the surge will depend on the ability of close to 10,000 newly trained Iraqi troops to help in securing the worst neighborhoods. To date, such Iraqi units have inspired little confidence. It's worth noting this is the second major attempt to take back Baghdad from insurgents in just 6 months. The first, called Operation Forward Together, flopped when only U.S. soldiers did any moving forward. Key Iraqi units failed to show up. American commanders say it'll be different this time. Iraqi units have improved. Plus, there's a new stick and carrot approach, $1 billion in reconstruction and job creation aid for Baghdad, plus an Iraqi government promise to bring in political reforms to give minority Sunnis more influence. So much is at stake, the U.S. military has previously balked at the surge. But the departure of Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld last month and a reshuffling of the U.S. commanders in Iraq has cleared the way for new tactics. Those arguing that Bush has to act now to confront the militias include prominent Washington defense analyst Jeffrey White.
That's going to risk more casualties on our part, but there's a definite need to be more aggressive in our own actions And then once we're in an area, we need to sanitize it of the elements that are operating against us, whether that's a Sunni insurgent element or a Shia element. And then we need to turn it over to the Iraqis. And when we do turn it over to the Iraqis, we cannot leave completely. We have to maintain some kind of presence there to make sure the area doesn't revert.
While new generals in Iraq will go along with Bush's plans, most officers dislike gambles. All or nothing operations can lead to disasters, end careers in flame. So these are nervous days in command centers, according to prominent writer on military affairs, Robin Wright.
There are real concerns within the Pentagon about whether this actually sets the United States up for a bigger loss down the road, because if it's not successful, there are really no obvious alternatives, no plan Bs. The U.S. does not have additional troops. U.S. public opinion and congressional positions at the moment are dead set against anything more than about 20,000, both because of the numbers and I think also because of the cost.
In Congress, even many Republicans seem dubious about sending more troops.
A new escalation in our forces.
Well, some prominent Democrats, including Senator Edward Kennedy, today demanded Congress act to stop Bush's plan.
The American people sent a clear message in November that we must change course in Iraq and begin to withdraw our troops. An escalation, whether it is called a surge or any other name, is still an escalation. And I believe it would be an immense new mistake. It would compound the original misguided decision to invade Iraq.
Even some who support the plan worry that it's been built up as a short-term operation to appease public opinion, when recent history suggests it will not be short or easy.
So surge, in my mind, is a very bad word to be using when it comes to Iraq. Iraq is not amenable to surge solutions. Iraq needs long-term commitment and long-term solutions.
The surge plan is unlikely to succeed unless the much-reviled, pro-Shia Maliki government can rise to the national challenge and show it can deliver both security and fairness. There are so many imponderables. How strong are the insurgents? How many casualties will the U.S. public stomach? How will Iraqis themselves respond? The unknowns make the operation exceptionally dangerous. Some feel the U.S. has run out of other options.
We need to take the risks that are entailed. And there are risks in not doing anything. There are risks that Iraq will slide fully into a civil war. There are risks that our enemies, like Iran, will triumph in Iraq. So this is a very high-stakes game.
Others wonder if it's already too late.
This is a moment that people really want to see make a difference. I think there are a lot of concerns that this may not make that difference. It's just not enough numbers, too short a period of time with too large an enemy and a multifaceted enemy. You have the al-Qaeda element, you have the Sunni insurgents, and then you have the sectarian nature fueled in large part by Shiite militias. It's an enormous challenge, in many ways the most ambitious, perhaps even more than the kind of enemy we faced in Vietnam.
Finally, for the worn, overstretched, and weary U.S. military, more frustrating than the risk, perhaps, is the awareness that it's now been tasked to recapture the very capital it thought, almost 4 years ago, that it was actually liberating. Brian Stewart, CBC News.
It's a daunting task. Even the new U.S. commander for Iraq is calling the situation dire and warning that the way ahead will be difficult. And that's News in Review. I'm Carla Robinson. Thanks for watching. The number of Canadian soldiers killed in Afghanistan continues to grow. So does the number of wounded.
I just remember bang, I remember flying, I remember my head skidding on the ground.
And those who must struggle to recover from terrible injuries.
I'd say like pure light to pure blackness. It's the only way to describe it. It's the complete opposite. I've entered another world.
On News and Review today, Afghanistan, the dead and wounded. Hello, I'm Carla Robinson. Canada's mission in Afghanistan has become an increasingly bloody one. 44 soldiers and 1 diplomat have been killed since Canadian troops arrived in Afghanistan 5 years ago, and 37 of those deaths occurred last year. The sight of all those soldiers leaving Afghanistan in coffins has brought home to Canadians the dangers of the mission in that country. It's hard on soldiers preparing to ship out to Afghanistan.
I've been doing this for years, but when it comes to a deployment like this, you're saying, wow, I'm bound and determined to come back. I have things that I need to do. You know, I'm still a fairly young man, and we have a whole life in front of us. I mean, like, when you look around, you know, there's so much that you have to live for.
It's hard on their families, too.
I don't want to be looking at an empty pillow. I'm too young to be a widow.
The military goes to great lengths to make sure the dead soldiers are repatriated to Canada with full honors, and that the grieving loved ones are helped and comforted. But it's never easy.
It's not good. And I'm soft-hearted myself, so it's, you know.
Yes.
And you hear the bagpipes go on and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in the front row and, you know, the kids are just, you know, looking at you and you're standing at attention and you're just trying to hold it in. And we're only human.
And then there are the wounded. More than 200 Canadian soldiers have been wounded in Afghanistan, many of them severely. For them, the war may be over, but the battle to recover from their injuries can be a long and painful one, like the one Master Corporal Paul Franklin is fighting. Here's the CBC's Andre Lau with his story.
I want the old person, I want the old piece of me again. Unfortunately, it's not there.
There was a time when Paul Franklin would wake up and decide to run a marathon. He loved to climb and hike and skateboard with his son. Franklin wants to do all those things again one day.
It's always weird holding your legs like this.
But first, he needs to learn how to walk.
It's like a different life. You know, my new life has changed. Like, this is the new normal. This is the new person who I am.
As part of his recovery, the new Paul Franklin is getting used to speaking at public events, sharing the details of how his life changed.
It's about as clean as she's gonna get.
Paul doesn't like to falter in public.
Please welcome Master Corporal Paul Franklin.
On January 15th, 2006, I lost both my legs to a suicide bomber in Kandahar City, Afghanistan. I worked for the Provincial Reconstruction Team, and 2 days prior, I climbed a mountain in the Hindu Kush foothills overlooking the same Kandahar Valley. The path of Alexander the Great lay before me. His goal was world domination, and yet 48 hours from me summiting that mountain, I was struggling for my life, and all I wanted to do was go home.
It was a routine patrol, a visit to a village, lunch at the airfield, and then the drive back to the base for the Provincial Reconstruction Team. Paul was a medic who doubled as a driver. The convoy was just pulling into Kandahar City when it passed a taxi stand. A yellow cab suddenly sped up.
All of a sudden he pulls out and he hits us, and it's smack dab on the right-hand side, and he detonates the 7 rockets that he's got inside the vehicle. And at that point, huge explosion.
The G-Wagon was thrown up and over onto the other side of the road. Paul was tossed out of the vehicle.
I just remember bang, I remember flying, I remember my head skidding on the ground, I remember tumbling, I remember hitting something. Inside my head, I felt like I flew about 50 meters. And I can feel it, close my eyes, the smells, the stench, the feeling, it's all there.
Paul remembers his hair and face on fire and using his hands to put it out. Then he noticed his left leg lying 5 or 6 feet away.
I remember I looked up, I saw my leg, and then I knew I had to put a tourniquet on. I knew, because I've been teaching it for so long, it becomes second nature.
Paul and 2 other soldiers survived the suicide bomb attack, but their VIP guest, Canadian diplomat Glenn Barry, was sitting at the bomb's point of impact. He was killed instantly. As Barry's escort and driver, Paul is haunted by questions of what if.
I feel a little bit of a failure in the job, that I didn't do it as well as I could have. Maybe if I was a little bit faster, slower, then he wouldn't have hit me in the exact position where he did, which would have killed Glenn. Okay, let's try this.
The flashbacks in Paul's head compete with the focus on retraining his body.
Night and day, more than night and day. It's, I'd say, like pure light to pure blackness. That's the only way to describe it. It's the complete opposite. I've entered another world.
It is, but your endurance.
4 months after the bombing, Paul has physically pushed himself beyond anyone's expectations. He's graduated to prosthetics called sea legs.
You got your balance?
Yeah, I'm good.
The legs run on rechargeable batteries. A computer chip in the knee records how Paul walks and makes constant automatic adjustments. Paul says these are Gucci kit. It's military slang for the best you can get. The legs also come at a Gucci price, at $38,000 each. But as far as technology can take him, Paul still has to do the walking himself.
Try it the hard way.
I want one foot in front. You can pick whichever one.
Okay.
So you're going to shift your weight onto the right.
Paul is in constant pain, but he refuses to dwell on his limits. Doctors originally told him he'd never walk again.
And, yeah, and then straight.
It's like your legs are in sludge.
Without his knees or major leg muscles, Paul has to rely on his hip flexors to take each step. Walking becomes a process.
Oh, this is brutal.
And this isn't a very big hill.
And I want to hike.
The tiny muscles have to move his entire leg, place the foot in the right place, then move the other leg and the other foot.
It's completely different. It's, the closest I could say is when I was a kid in snowshoes. Would be, not snowshoes, yeah, snowshoes.
Oops.
Walking up slopes and over curves is exhausting, but Paul is also tired of living in a hospital.
There you go. Good.
That's hard. I want to go home. I really want to go home. It's tiring. It's, I had a 6-month tour, and then now I had 4 months in the hospital. It's been a year. It's a year away from home and a normal life. I want to get back to it. Get back to doing things I like to do.
Audra wants him to come home too. Cooking isn't something she likes to do. That's more Paul's department. But she married a soldier. That meant a lot of time away on missions and training, away from raising their son and household chores. It's just the way life went.
I know the risks. I signed on the line. I'm fully aware of what he does. And I just had a lot of faith that he's a well-trained soldier, he's with some good guys, and that he will come home and he'll be fine. So it never occurred to me that he would ever get hurt. That was the last thing I thought would happen.
Audra had little time to process the phone call that Paul was hurt. She and Simon had to get their passports, pack, and fly to the military hospital in Germany. They had no idea what shape he would be in.
He was burnt, his face was burnt, his hands were burnt, his left leg was obviously missing. And I said, please, can you cover up your legs? I'm not ready to look at that yet. But then he smiled and told a joke, and then you realize he's the same guy. He's just physically a little bit different, and then we moved on. What do we do now? What's the next step?
Audra says she's treating Paul's homecoming just like his return from any other tour. The rules of the house won't change, and neither will the way she treats him.
I've always said that from the beginning of this. I'm not his nurse. There are some women that go in and they would give their husbands sponge baths and stuff. That's not my job. My job is to be his wife, to be his friend, to hang out, and he needs his privacy and his dignity.
After 4 months in hospitals, Paul is finally going home, but nothing will be familiar. They had to buy a new house and modify it for Paul's disability. The car is also fitted with hand controls, so Paul can drive.
Simon doesn't want to have breakfast.
Oh, yeah, breakfast.
With Paul home, Audra is grateful she no longer has to be a single parent, but she's shouldering more responsibility in other ways.
He was always the guy who would get up in the middle of the night and investigate the noise. Like, I always felt safe with him, and now I don't. Now I think I'm the one who provides the safety. Roles have definitely switched. So now I'm more of the... Did you brush your teeth very well?